Hi everyone, John Martin here, and today we're going to be talking about fake news, how to sift through the noise. Why are we learning about fake news? Well, let's look at an example from The Guardian. In 2016, AWD News published a false story with the headline, Israeli Defense Minister, "If Pakistan send ground troops to Syria on any pretext, we will destroy this country with a nuclear attack." Now, this site, AWD News, is known to be a fake news website. But without checking the story, Pakistan's defense minister tweeted out this threat: "Israel forgets Pakistan is a nuclear state too." Think about it. Here we got two nuclear powers arguing over social media about a story that was completely made up. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed, but this example shows just how dangerous fake news can be. Our learning objectives today are: by the end of this lesson, you will be able to apply the SIFT method to evaluate the credibility of a variety of news sources, and use a Web 2.0 resource to curate a balanced collection of reliable sources. Here's how we're going to assess that. Using the SIFT method, you will evaluate a variety of media outlets found on allsides.com media bias chart and add 3 of them to your symbol. Then you're going to log into Checkology and take the assigned quiz over fake news. A score of 70% is considered passing. Finally, we have a 1-question survey that will ask you how much you feel this session helped you in determining what is fake news. Let's look at misinformation versus disinformation to start. Misinformation is unintentionally false information. Journalists and news organizations, no matter how meticulous and careful they are bound to make mistakes, but reputable ones will publish retractions and tell you the real story when they figure it out. Disinformation, on the other hand, is intentionally false. It's made up on purpose. Now, it could be created to make money, it could be created to convince you of a political viewpoint, or it could be created to make fun of something like satire. Disinformation is going to be the focus of today's presentation because we're going to call fake news any media item that transmits disinformation. Okay? Now, I mentioned satire earlier, and it's not the same as fake news, really, so let's look at the difference. Satire is a poem, novel, film, or other work of art which uses humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize prevailing immorality or foolishness, especially as a form of social or political commentary. In other words, it's making fun of something. Okay, that's why they're making up information, to make fun of a viewpoint they disagree with. But even though the intent is not to deceive you, satire only works if you know it's satire. Otherwise, you might believe it's true. So luckily, the method we're going to discuss here will also help you determine if a source is satire or not. The method is called SIFT, and SIFT is an acronym that stands for Stop, Investigate the Source, Find Better Coverage, and Trace Claims, Quotes, and Media to the original context. Let's look at each of these in turn. The first move, stop. The first thing you're going to want to do is stop and ask yourself, do I know this source? All organizations and individuals have biases and agendas, and it's important to know them ahead of time. As an aside, if you are thinking about reading the comments section for any piece of news, I strongly consider you take this step's advice and just stop. The second move is investigate the source. Here you're going to research the source and find out if they're reputable. Now, the creator of the 4 moves, Mike Caulfield, suggests in a great video that you start with a Wikipedia search. Wikipedia is not perfect, but it is a good start, and it can point you to the direction of other resources that might be more reputable than Wikipedia that can give you this information that you need. Third, even if the organization's reputable, you want to find better coverage. So you want to see what other sources are saying about the same story or topic and kind of figure out what the consensus on this is. Fact-checking sites are a great resource for this step, as is allsides.com. And finally, you're going to trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context. So even if something is technically true, that doesn't mean it's being reported in the most accurate context. The best way to get the original context of information is to go to the original reporting on it. If a piece of information doesn't report its sources, that is a huge red flag. Alright, let's look at the example we talked about earlier. Fake news story prompts Pakistan to issue nuclear warning to Israel. And so I'm going to stop, and I see The Guardian. And I don't know The Guardian. So I'm going to move on to the second step, which is investigate the source. I'm going to take Mike Caulfield's advice, and I'm going to type in The Guardian, Wikipedia, and I'm just scanning this to see if this is a reputable source. I can see it was founded in 1821, so it's 201 years old. And if I go down, I can also see that it is considered a newspaper of record in the UK, and that means it is considered authoritative and independent. All right. So I can safely say this is a generally reputable organization, so that's great. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm also going to go on to the next step, which is find better coverage. And for this, I'm going to type in a keyword search for Pakistan, Israel, and fake news. Scanning through the headlines, I can see them very similar. So the New York Times has one, reading fake news, nuclear threat, duped by fake news story, Pakistan minister threatens. Here's the story we've already looked at. And going down, there's another one from CBS News. So we have CBS, CNN, and the New York Times, all with similar headlines. Let's take a look at one more closely. And looking through, I can see the same fake news website. Defense Minister Khawaja Asif. Let's see if that's the same person here. Scroll down. Yep. Same people involved, same organizations involved. It looks like the coverage is very similar. We got the same story. Great. All right. But now we have one final step. Trace it to the original context. Now, the original context here is the fake news story, and I'm not going to give them any traffic. So I'm going to go to the first story that reported on this event happening. And that would be this New York Times piece. This also helps us with our third step even a little bit more because we're still finding better coverage. And I'm seeing same person here. They have a little intro of a different event. Okay. Saber-rattling Twitter post. Yep. This looks very similar. And so I can safely say that our first article is pretty accurate. It's not fake news. Great. All right, guys, so let's remind you of our tasks today. You're going to go to the All Sides Media Bias Chart and use it as a starting point to investigate some sources representing a variety of viewpoints. Add those to your Symbaloo. Then you're going to take the quiz on Checkology and try and get a 70%. And finally, the survey is going to ask you if you feel this session helped you detect fake news. So before we wrap up, let me just show you the media chart on allsides.com. Here's allsides.com. And here's the media bias chart. Okay, and you can see a bunch of different news organizations. It's going to tell you if they're left of center, really left of center, or right wing. Okay? I want you to research some of these organizations and try and pick a mix and add 3 that you find reputable to your Symbaloo. And keep in mind, when you're adding a source to your Symbaloo, sometimes you're going to have to type in the whole URL. Because if I type in Snopes here, it doesn't bring up Snopes.com. So I need to go to a different page, go to Snopes.com, and paste that in here. And then I get Snopes.com. Okay. So the search function on Symbaloo can be a little wonky. Here are the references for you. I'm going to link this slideshow to the library website, so you will be able to visit these resources. These are some resources that I also find helpful. The Clark College Libraries has a fantastic overview of SIFT with videos of Mike Caulfield explaining each step in the process. These are really helpful. I highly suggest you go there if you're confused. And allsites.com is great, not just for the media bias chart, but they also do reporting on stories, and they show you 3 different sources from the left, from the center, and from the right. So I highly suggest you use this resource when you're investigating news stories. And that is all. Thank you for joining me today.